Do, 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 do. All right, great morning, everyone. Megan, good to see you. Thanks for the thumbs up. Dr. Tiny, good to see you. Chris Bowden, good to see you. Peggy Lamb and everyone else, good to see you. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording and then I'll start it all over again, and then we will go live.
Hey, Ty.
Good morning, everyone. Megan, good to see you. Thanks for the thumbs up. Dr. Tiny, good to see you. All right, so welcome to another episode of a Monday Morning Meetup. My name is Ty Cohen, along with my incredible, brilliant, talented co-host, Caroline Trainer. Caroline, good morning. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? I'm just
Doing good,
changing
doing
my
good.
name at the moment. Let me put in trainer. I'm great. Had a great morning. How are you doing?
Very cool.
Can you hear
I'm
me
doing
okay?
good. I'm doing good. I can. Can you guys hear both myself and Caroline?
Cool.
All right, awesome.
And you're still away, Ty?
I'm still away. This is actually the last day. After
Nice.
today, we'll be back. And I think we have a little bit of a delay, so we're gonna work with it. Do you guys hear a delay at all on your end, or is it just on my end? Let me know if you hear a delay.
There's a bit of a delay.
You do hear. Okay. All right. So that's the beauty of doing things live, right? You never know what's going to happen. You never know how technology is going to respond, if it's going to play nice or not. But we always move forward with this. Caroline, so we have a pretty cool guest today. And I always tell you guys, look, the reason why you want to go all in with starting your digital business, with learning this digital marketing stuff, is because no one can ever take it away from you. What I mean by that is no one can ever take the knowledge away from you, right? Once you have the know-how, you have a basic understanding of it, you can have ups and downs. And Lord knows I've had my share of ups and downs, but you can always bounce back. And typically you bounce back bigger and better than the level that you were at before. And our guest is someone that's a perfect example of that. He's someone that I've known for, I want to say, well over a decade. We kind of came into the Kindle space, and we were competitors, friends, and we had this great competition going on. And you know, the thing is, we never kind of came out and said we're in competition with one another. Right, we just had fun with it. We kind of looked at one another. I know I modeled some of his stuff. I'm sure he's probably modeled some of my stuff. And he's just a great guy. So Caroline, do you have a quote that you want to share for today?
I don't. I'm just picking up your message now, but I'm going to grab one throughout the session. My Slack didn't come through, so I've actually just got your message now. I'll grab one throughout the session, but it was going to be something about not giving up. So bear with me and I'll come in with it shortly. But I was going to say to you, were you both, were you friends when you were competitors, or since years on after you're not competitors any longer, or you both sort of been successful in your own rights?
No, that's a great question. So, we never spoke much, but we're always cordial. We would see one another at events, see one another in the space, right? And I think that question right there also serves another purpose, and that is to always be cordial to people, because you never know, right? Like, I have this saying, and that saying is, when it comes to relationships, build out relationships, get out of your shell, talk to people, because the more hands you shake, the more money you can make. And him and I have made money together, directly and indirectly. And we've also kept this relationship. Now, I haven't spoken to him in years. Still haven't spoken to him. Today would be the first time that we've actually verbally spoken to one another. We were chatting back and forth on Messenger. But don't burn bridges. That's the other thing, right?
Don't burn bridges.
I put a post
so
up,
true.
and he came in behind one of my posts. This was a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, dude, I would love to share XYZ. And I'm like, that would be perfect for the Monday Morning Meetup and for you guys right here. So you're going to hear from someone that I think is a brilliant marketer, who is someone who is just a great all-around guy. He's a family guy. He's someone that cares for other people. And he's someone who has a lot of experience. All right. So with that said, I'm going to bring on the one and only. I'm asking you to unmute as well. I'm going to bring on the one and only Jonny Andrews. Jonny, are you there?
Hi, Jonny. I am, and we're now fighting.
there we go.
There we go. Look at this. It was great. Yeah, no, I messaged Carolyn going, I heard you were renaming yourself. How'd you do that? There we go.
Have you? I haven't seen your message. Yeah.
That's okay. I can't see it either.
Mr. Charcuterie.
Absolutely. My word.
You know what you were saying about what Ty was just saying as well, Jonny, about the networking. You must be a mind reader, because this morning I was prepping tonight's Fast Pass session, and I'm going to do it about networking. How actually, collaborating with competitors can be a really good idea if they're willing and open. And how much you can sort of help then each other out, and then how important it is to nurture your network. I had someone in my network who was really talented in this sort of leadership development space, and I need his help now with something, and I'm reaching out to him, and I've not messaged him for a good couple of years. We're connected on Facebook, and he's cool about it, but it made me realize that I should be potentially better at nurturing some of those professional relationships, because we worked together for years at the police, and we were very good friends as well, and we sort of lost touch a little bit. But it's so important, isn't it? So the fact that you and Jonny were in the Kindle space from the beginning, hardcore Kindlers, and you still
that's one way to put it. I feel far more gangster when you say it like that than it kind of felt throughout the whole process.
This is so much more exciting, Jonny.
Absolutely. It's like, oh man, I'm gonna get like a tattoo of that in a cool kind of pattern. That'll be nice.
I was the first Kindle king.
Yep, there you go. Yeah. And speaking of king, look, I want to go in and talk about you a bit, Jonny, before I bring you on and ask you about yourself, right? So I'm going to talk about you, and then we'll come in and we'll ask you about yourself. So Jonny Andrews. So here's a couple of his random highlights, right? So one of the most dynamic, this is a nice substitute word for insane business owners that you've probably never heard of. He got to start with online business back in 2004. So way back in 2004, 20 years ago, went from broke, homeless, and struggling with ID theft to growing a 7-figure business without a credit card or bank account, right? So there's probably some of you guys that are right there right now who are kind of struggling with the financial side of things. After growing a business to over 214,000 email subscribers, he all but vanished from the scene. Guy just totally ghosted everyone and just disappeared, right? He's one of the few internet marketers to actually exit from the make money online industry and carve out a real niche without using his face in markets like paranormal romance, sci-fi, snarky zen, and others. So you guys can relate, because there's a lot of writers and Kindle publishers that are also on this call, Jonny. And since 2010, he's been quietly working behind the scenes, growing an agency that has worked with over 18,000 authors, entrepreneurs, helping many hit the USA Today and New York Times bestseller list. He's published over 325 books across the host of genres, including fiction and nonfiction. He's created multiple successful information products, as well as launched subscription businesses. He's grown and sold ecosystems that reach up to 48 million fans per month. Through word of mouth, he's now considered by some as their secret marketing weapon and consultant with entrepreneurs and celebrities. During the 2020 lockdown, he rebooted The Tiger King. You guys have heard of that show, right? I'm sure you've heard of it. The Tiger King reached from 325,000 to 8 million, generating over 100,000 in licensing fees and an untold volume in recurring royalties. Today, he lives in the Chicagoland area, Chirac, right, with his wife, helping her grow and expand one of the hottest niche markets seen in nearly 20 years. And I had to just ask my wife, I said, how the hell do you pronounce this word? And maybe you can help me too. Because at the board, she's got the little knives and cheese. And I'm like, you want me to eat cheese again? But you've helped your wife start this help me out here because I'm suffering. Help a
Charcuterie,
bro.
absolutely
Charcuterie.
charcuterie. Or
It's
I mean, if you
Charcuterie.
really want to get crazy about it, you can call it charcuterie. That was a huge TikTok thing for a while. I'm just saying.
There you go. Okay. All right. So
Adult
there we go.
Lunchables.
That's a whole new niche in itself right there. Right. So
Oh yeah.
So Jonny, who are you, man? So like I said, we've known each other, right, for a while. You were rocking and rolling in the Kindle space, did some beautiful things there. We had a lot of fun. You know, marketing was really fun back then because we had some really cool people who would get together, events and everything else. And like, how did you get into that space? Like, what exposed you to starting an online business and Kindle publishing in general? And was that your first piece of exposure to the internet, or was there something before that?
Well, that's a healthy question. Yeah, man. First, thank you for the intro. That's always fun. So I had, I see a lot of folks here talking about failure in the chat, which I think is important because basically almost you have to go into everything expecting a fairly healthy level of horrific failure because and I even tell this to I basically mention this to everyone. It's like, I've been able to make a decent living out of failing 99.7% of the time. So it's like just slightly higher than the average human body temperature of failure. It's good, right? So I got started a bunch of years before that where I'd always been entrepreneurial. But I had, it was interesting because I was actually doing an import business with these epic laptops that I had been able to source from China for a while. And so this was before Alibaba. This was like 2000, like 1999, 2000 kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, the Trade Center thing. So I would bring them in. These laptops were they were less than what you would pay today for these things, but they had the specs that were crazy. And so I was selling to these like people who are using CAD to help design buildings and stuff like that. And I would just load them up with every piece of illegal software you could possibly imagine because entrepreneurship, right? But then, Trade Center, planes, explosions, death, murder, and ports shut down. When they came back on, Dell had probably sent somebody over there because now they were selling great laptops at great prices. I'm like, I can't compete with the big boys. So I had ended up hooking up with a friend of mine who was an auto mechanic, and we created what became the world's first auto repair quote website where regular people could get on and like describe their problem, and then local auto repair people would give them information and stuff like that. And obviously it was just sort of a lead generation, kind of a, hey, get to know you sort of thing. And that was where I learned how to get media kind of thing, because we ran out of money real quick. It was hilarious. I'm like, oh, maybe I should have thought of that. But we ran out of money. So I had to ask the question, how the heck do you get people to come to a website if you don't have money to buy anything? It's like we were doing radio ads because Google Ads they came out in 2004, didn't they? The ads, like
I was going to ask you about that. They did.
Yeah.
It was Overture before that.
There you go. Yeah. So I hadn't played around with the Overture thing, but that's where I learned how to get into media. And so landed on the front page business section of like 21 different newspapers. And I'll tell you something, like back then media would have a more impactful kind of like direct to sale kind of thing. It's not like that anymore, but it still has this property where it's like, I was like smiling and dialing, cold calling auto repair shops around me going, hi, can I blah, 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 blah. And they're like, yeah, man, we're about to sit down for lunch. Call us tomorrow. And I was just like, absolutely. Because, I'm kind of a schmuck like that. But what happened was I'm like, all right, who are the people who are still reading who are still reading newspapers? I'm like, these old ass auto repair people, right? And so I landed front page business section, and I mean, kind of like not as bad as now because I'm only 2 weeks behind on the haircut, but like I looked like Doc Brown from Back to the Future if somebody had absolutely electrocuted the crap out of him. There's a picture of me standing on a street corner holding a keyboard to a computer as if it's like some baby that I found in a trash can. I mean, I look awful, but it was on the front page in 21 different newspapers because I figured out how to syndicate it after I did the interview. And that landed me then like this really fast interview on an AM radio show. Got 6,000 subscribers just from that one thing. I'm like, oh, I guess I'll be doing more media. But here's what happened. It completely flipped the script. Now I was smiling and dialing. I'm like, hi, Ian Otto. That was the name of it. And they're like, oh yeah, man, we read about you. We've been meaning to talk to you, which is a completely different mindset shift. So that kind of led to a whole bunch of stuff where it's like, we can talk about this, but like minimum movement, maximum impact, target softening, all that other kind of stuff. But that was where it really got, now that thing crashed and burned. And here's valuable lessons. So everybody start taking notes right here, is that if you're going to sell something, you have to make sure that the people who are going to give you the money for it don't hate the idea and resent you for making it. Nobody told me that. I had no idea. I hope you hear the sarcasm in my voice, because that was pretty stinking obvious. And I just tap danced right into that because I did an interview with Auto Mechanic Magazine or something like that. Oh my God. Like
which was a huge magazine.
Yeah.
Which was huge. Yeah. Yep.
They hated it.
So
that was kind of like the first step into the internet marketing, and it was awful.
Okay. So you had no prior experience business-wise or anything like that. You're going into this thing, like you said, you've got the look, right? That really attracts people. And I'm being facetious when I say that.
Right. And I have a face for radio.
What gave you the confidence to go in and do this stuff? Like not having any prior experience, right? Probably not dressing the part, looking the part, and everything else. Because a lot of entrepreneurs, we've got people that are just starting out, and we have people that are in business, and some are doing well. But there's always a confidence issue. There's always this doubt, right? That's circulating in the back of your mind. How did you push past that? And like, how do you still push past that?
I don't. What I've learned is like those voices are always going to be there, and you're never going to beat them, but you can outrun them. And so part of the thing that I've developed is speed of execution is a really big deal. Like they always say, money follows speed. And one of the things that I've learned how to do, and obviously, because here's what, like, if you think about it along like sort of a continuum, you're going to have like, okay, I have an idea. And then if you're just starting out, you've got to figure out what to do. And that's, the concept of info courses and obviously YouTube and all that other stuff. You're going to digest all this information. That's going to be new information, right? And so now your brain has to process that, and you have to create associations in order for you to be able to understand the information that you're doing. Now you've heard book smarts versus street smarts, right? Well, this is where most people kind of screw it up, is you can study, right? You're going to get the book smarts, and more than likely you can probably talk a good game. But until you've executed, you will, like most people who are like, but I don't know what to do. I'm like, what have you done? She's like, I spent like $50,000 in courses, and I'm doing all this stuff, and I hired a coach, and I'm like, cool. What did you do? And they're like, well, I haven't started yet. I'm like, and that's the problem, because that mythical gap between reading it and kind of like loosely comprehending versus like owning the crap out of the reality, the only way to cross that gap is through action. You can't read another book, you can't watch another video, you can't talk to another person, because they're probably going to tell you 11 million things that 11 million other people have told you, right? If you don't take that action, you're never going to connect those dots for real. And I learned that at an early age. And so what I learned how to do was, in spite of all my doubts, in spite of being scared to death, and I will tell you, and I don't recommend this, but being starving, broken, homeless does help quite a bit with the motivation. Because if I wanted to eat, and this isn't directly about that thing, but it's like I had to learn how to do stuff to get some money on that PayPal debit card so that I could go to the grocery store and buy a sandwich. And that is God's honest truth. I'm like, well, I'm hungry today. Maybe I can get some ramen. And so that was really the big thing. And so rather than say, and obviously there was no Uber at the time, but rather than trying to go do a gig like that, which I couldn't do, because also with the identity stuff, destroying my credit, I had done so many interviews and people are just like, nah, dude, if what was the phrase I used? if you can't keep your house, how can we trust you to keep ours? And I'm like, oh, Rodrigo, that was the guy's name who did it, who lives at 565 Iowa Avenue in Aurora, Illinois. Like, that's what Tony Robbins said, where emotion hits like a thing, it like cements that in your brain. So that's what it was, is I just kind of like, being desperate is helpful. I'm not entirely sure how to, how to like harness that as a positive benefit.
How do you manufacture that? Yeah, you can't manufacture that, right? I mean, it's like,
yeah. What I do now is, because I so it's like, there's always that apprehension where you're going to do the execution. You're like, but I might look stupid. I'm like, I look stupid anyway. And I just do it, because it's like one of those things where you have to look at the evidence. And it's like, listen, I am 46 years old. I think I've come to at least some level of acceptance of who I am as a person. I'm like, all right, when have I ever concerned myself with the thoughts of others? I'm like, well, daily actually, but today we're getting over it. And so it's always like, take those actions, learn from those things. But while you're doing it, document your process, because what you're going to be able to look back on. And so the pattern that happened for me then, so it's like taking it all the way back to the beginning, was idea, do whatever, because this was back before all this, like, oh, here's how you do this. Because now all this stuff's like, the info is just available. But it was like,
so before YouTube, before Instagram, before podcasts, before shows like this, you're figuring that out on your own. Jonny,
so I'm just like, exactly. So I'm just like, because not that you can tell by my speech patterns, but I'm probably, today I'm probably a little better off because I exercised before I came, but I'm like an 8.5 out of 10 on the ADHD scale, which, let me tell you something, if you want to really deal with something, it's like, start hyper focusing on that and realize your entire personality is just like a myriad of symptoms. I'm like, damn it, I thought it was original. It's like, no, it's not. These are all symptoms. But what I would do is I would like execute, slam into the wall, be like, well, that sucked. What do I do now? And instead of being like, oh, I failed and it's awful, because I'm like, everything fails and everything's awful. How do we learn from our failure and awfulness? And so I just kind of took that to heart, and I would execute, crash, execute, crash, execute, crash. And what I saw was I was moving just a little bit further every single time, like through that process. And, years and years later, and I mean, so many mistakes, but I just kind of was like, well, I don't really have much of a choice at this point, because I clearly can't hold a job to save my life. And yeah, it's just like, okay, I kind of have to like, accept a couple of realities. And it's like, this thing is interesting enough and complicated enough for me to like get behind. And so I'm just going to sort of embrace how I am as a person, understand that the majority of things are failure. I'd already lost my friends at this point, because nobody could handle like the way that I was being in life, because it's like I had to go and completely isolate in this stuff. And it was like, it wasn't until I discovered the world where you live that all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I've met my people. But it was funny. So it's like, after, the homelessness and the identity theft and all this other stuff, I sort of like crawled my way into the upstairs bedroom of what you could kind of construe as like a frat house. It wasn't a frat house, but it was nuts. Because, for example, there's this one, raging alcoholic that I lived with that had like this 20-foot python in the basement, and he would just put on heavy metal music and suck down a bottle of Crown Royal every night to like, boo! And I'm like, no, really, I can totally do videos like this. I was there for 4 years, and talking to the guy who owned the place, he was like, yeah, you went in one day and 4 years later came out with a suitcase, went, I'm rich, and moved into like a $1.3 million mansion on the river. From that.
Isn't that insane? I want to stop right there, because you've said so many different things, man. I'm making mental notes in my head. But so you literally lived in a Big Brother house before Big Brother on steroids. So you guys could have filmed that reality show way back then. But you said, look, I'm so concerned with looking stupid in front of people if I try to start this business, but shit, I look stupid anyway. Right. So let me just dive into it. And I think that that's a big concern of a lot of people, is just looking a certain way. Right. So you push past that. There's so many different things that you've been able to overcome with this thing that I think it's fascinating. People are looking at you right now and they're seeing a lot of themselves in who you were. which is why I wanted to get you on this show, because people doubt themselves. They see these flaws in themselves. Look, you talked about the credit, right? I remember coming when I first moved to North Carolina, looking to go get an office. And my credit was so terrible. I'm looking to go get an office and I wanted to start this business. And the guy says to me, why would I rent an office to you? You can't even pay your bills. And I was like, holy crap. And from that point on, my mission was to make sure that my credit score is 800. I set all of these different goals just from that one rejection. I just felt like an idiot at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So goal setting, have you ever been a big fan of goal setting, and was that part of your journey, like getting you out there, or have you just been someone who could just figure it all out and just go from there?
I've always been very magical, Ty. Thank you for asking. No, not at all. Well, part of it was being totally miserable in every conceivable way for so many years. And I'm like, well, if my life doesn't change, bleh. And then one day I realized, wait a minute, hold on a second. If I want things to change, I got to do something. And I mean, it's like, if you want to really get into some crazy stuff, finding, this is one of these interesting things. And here's something you probably didn't think a dude was going to talk about, but it wasn't until.
Let's do it. We're an open book here.
We do
it.
everything here.
Do you guys want to talk about everything here? All right. Let's put everything in the chat box, because we want to make sure that he knows that we're serious. Put everything in the chat box if you guys want to talk about everything. We'll take off the underwear and we'll get naked and talk about it all.
Do whatever you want.
Absolutely. There we go. Yeah. All right. So basically what I figured out about these things is that so one of my unique little perspective things is, if you look at negative personality traits and how they arrive, most of that for most people is due to unaddressed childhood trauma kind of thing. So it's like, I grew up with, this is one of those things where it's more archaeological than anything else, where it's like someone can walk up, hike up to a lake and be like, well, look at this, Thompson, the crater looks like it could have been the impact site of a meteor, but we don't know. And then you have to excavate from the evidence kind of thing. And so if you look at so it's like, I never even heard of ADHD until I was like almost 30. Like, WTF, Batman, this was just crazy. So learning about that and how that stuff works, because there's like, on the upside, there's like incredible pattern recognition. There's going to be like, being calm under pressure. I mean, I wouldn't trade this for anything. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like basic tasks, like for example, being able to create an info course, it's like, oh, I know exactly how to do that. I know because I've done it like 1,000 times. What I used to do was I would go jump out of a plane or go bungee jumping, because the wall that I would hit immediately upon executing that kind of thing, it's like, imagine having perfect clarity, and the minute you go into execution, it shatters in fragments. And you're like, but this was right. Oh, that was there. And this was, why doesn't it make sense anymore? Like, that's what it's like. It's really awful. And on top of that, that's when, like, that moment of like hesitation, that's when and the big one is like shame and all this other stuff starts piling on. And you have to really be able to accept that. And you have to be able to identify that, because if you look at, and what it takes is like mindfulness of your thoughts and your own behaviors. So for example, let's look at it from a perspective, and I promise I'm going to tie this into like execution and making money and stuff like that.
Let's do it.
But let's say, for example, so we'll get a little ethereal for a second. Somebody does something and it pisses you off, right? Well, they did a thing. You have no control over that, right? But you have to look at how you reacted. Because once you start to understand this, you kind of see that, oh, the things that people are doing, they're more about themselves. It's almost like you don't matter, but it's like you make yourself matter. It's a very narcissistic thing that each one of us does, but we make ourselves matter.
Every single one of us.
Yeah, in those kind of situations.
It's a reflection of an experience that they had before, and oftentimes several experiences compounded.
Exactly, 100%.
And then now
exactly.
we throw ourselves into it, and we're like, oh, it's all about us.
Exactly. And so what a lot of that stuff comes down to, and it's so cliche that I almost I had like written it off for years until I realized, well, crap, I guess we need to get into this now. You know, looking at like my behavior and my responses to a tons of different things is that if you start thinking like you are not your thoughts, you know, what you are is you're making yourself about your thoughts. And so if you take a second, and you're mindful about what it is that you're doing and what it is that you're thinking, what you're going to start to see is that you probably have a lot of like negative limiting beliefs and a lot of negative limiting damaging self-talk that's going on. More than likely that came from something that you might not even remember. And amusingly enough, if it happened early enough, like, so for example, like I'm adopted. And so there's like this infant level crap. Like, how in the name of all of baby sweet Jesus could I even begin to process or remember any of that? I can't. But what happens is that stuff gets like stored in your nervous system. So you can almost think of your physical body as your unconscious mind. And so what you start realizing is that, oh crap, I've been, like, say, for example, you're depressed or anxious or all those things. You're actually, the longer you've been doing that, you're literally practicing being that way. And what it takes is depending on how long it's been going, but it takes a fairly spectacular, what's called a gestalt. Love that German word. Basically, you have to create a wall where you're like, oh my God, I'm stupid. People don't like me. Nothing's going to work. And you go, no. And you have to catch that. But you can't just catch it and stop it. You then have to replace it with something else. And what's great is if you can't stop talking shit about yourself, what you want to start doing, because, like, for example, your body can't understand the difference between sarcasm and reality. Okay.
Yeah.
You could be like, oh, I'm so dumb. And you can mean it in a stupid, silly way, but your body's going to interpret that as real. Right. And so what you want to do is like replace it. It's like, okay, if you can't stop talking shit about yourself, just say, I'm so smart, and just say it like it's sarcastic. Okay. Yeah. That kind of thing. And so what's going to happen is you can still be a dick to yourself, like cognitively, but the rest of your body's going to start like getting on board with how it's actually interpreting that. And so you want to be very mindful of how you're doing these things. And it's like, if you really want to do some work, you want to get into, what is it, EMDR therapy? It's like this eye movement stuff. So I had a stroke last year. And that was part of the whole comeback from that kind of thing was, like eye movement. I had a, like, I'll tell you a story about that later, but it's like, I learned how to, like, I literally got my brain to rewire itself by driving a lower whacker. That is not medically recommended, by the way. So if anybody don't do that, please, for the love of all that's holy. But yeah, that anyway, so that's kind of what EMDR is, like an eye movement thing. And what it does is it's really effective. I don't know why, but it's really effective at helping you kind of like access that crap that's embedded in your nervous system and help getting it out. Because most people our age, when we get to this point, we're like, okay, maybe there's a lot of stuff going right, but there's some stuff definitely going wrong. And what's happening is you kind of have to like look at, okay, they do, these other people do what they do, right? It's a human condition to be like, you did this, because it's true. They did do a thing. Yeah. However, it doesn't matter because you reacted to it, right? You reacted to it and you had the thought. And like, if you're ruminating, meaning like thoughts running around in your head, that's like you're like a systematic trauma response to help you like intellectualize whatever sort of tomfoolery has been going on.
You're trying to make sense of it. Yeah. It's making total sense. You're trying to make sense. Let me ask you a question. Look, so I think for the most part, right, especially this group that's here, we all know that when someone does something or there's something that happens outside of our control, right, the way that we react to it is what's most important. How do you get to a point where you're not instantly reactive and you actually think before you react, right? Because that's the part. That's the tough part, right? Is not just instantly going off and reacting for most people, right? Because and then afterwards you're like, oh shit, I was supposed to.
Right. Oh no, that 100%. Listen, that get used to it because that never goes away. I can't help you. No one can help you. Get in the boat. Here we are. But let me tell you how to do this. And it takes work, it takes practice, and it's like you probably heard that, like, okay, calm down, little Timmy, take a deep breath and count to 10. That's not entirely wrong. So for example, like I have with the ADHD comes something called like rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And so I never really understood why I was so moody all the time. And part of that was, it's like, I'm so amped up all the time that it's like somebody could be like, they could say something. And I'm also picking up on nonverbal cues like a crazy person, where it's like, I've had people like, how did you know? And I'll give you an example of this. When my wife was pregnant the first time, we actually were, I can't remember, we were either coming to or going from a doctor appointment. And we're sitting down at this burrito joint in St. Charles, Illinois. And she had something called hyperemesis during her first pregnancy, which is basically she, projectile vomited like somebody in Poltergeist like 50 times a day. It was absolutely insane. And so I was really trying to, take care of her and stuff. We'd be driving down the highway and she'd be like, oh, here we go. And it was just like, like she gave the best paint sprayers a run for their money at this point. It was nuts. But I felt terrible for the lady. Anyway, so we're sitting there talking, and she's got her coat next to her, and I'm looking at her. And it wasn't until like after it all happened that I realized what I had seen, but I was watching changes in her body, but not with my eyes. It was like I was able to perceive that stuff. And I'm like, oh, hon, you better get to the bathroom. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you're about to be sick. She's like, I feel fine. What are you talking about? 15 seconds later, she's like, oh, God. And like got up and ran. It's like later on, I realized what it was. I was watching like changes in her body. Like I could see the hairs on her arms start rising.
Oh, wow.
And things like that. But I didn't even perceive it initially. It wasn't until afterwards. And so that's one of those delightful gifts that comes with ADHD. It's like, you can tell your wife what she's going to puke. Really useful in internet marketing, by the way. It's incredible. But anyway, that's one of those things where you want to, like, that level of sensitivity with me creates like a thing where it's like, I'm probably going to overreact to nothing, or what maybe is something, but it's so small that a normal person wouldn't even react to it, right? And so I had to be like, well, that's not going to make me any fun at a dinner party. I should probably think about this. And so it's like, if I get hit with something, I'm like, okay, pause. So, Tom, tell me about the weather in your part of the world. Like that sort of thing. You just have to take a minute.
You're switching it.
Exactly. Yes. Just try to reframe it. And that sort of stuff. But the other piece of it, and this comes real close, and I found that a lot of people don't talk about it, but there's the initial reaction you have, but then there's also the part about people pleasing, where it's a lot of us don't want to look foolish because it's a defense mechanism against perceived shame, because we don't want to look like an
huge
asshole.
Thing.
Yes.
Yeah, but ego comes in, and it's one of the ways. Look, I've been able to get better and better and better at this, because for me, I see where things just slow down to like milliseconds, and I'm seeing the conversation or the thing happen in super slow motion, almost like the Matrix or so. And sometimes, depending on the individual, I want to be a little bit snarky, and I will be a little bit snarky to put them in their place. And then other times I'm just like, oh, this is just another human, silly humans. And then I'll let it pass by, right? So that's it. But I want to kind of switch gears a little bit, because you said something at the very beginning of this, and that is minimum movement, maximum impact, right? So how can we go in and apply something like that to our business? Talking about things that, if you guys noticed at the very beginning, I said, look, if you learn this marketing stuff, if you learn how to build an online business, you can have your ups and downs, but no one can ever take it away from you. Jonny's been talking about personal development, improving yourself, right? That's another thing, that if you really learn this stuff and you study who you are and why you react the way that you react and why other people react the way that they react, that can never be taken away from you. So let's go into the minimum movement, maximum impact. How does someone apply that to their business, and can that also be applied to life as well?
Yeah, totally. Well, I'll even segue out of the thing. So it's like, if you look at all this crazy thought, personal development kind of stuff, and self-awareness, one of the big things that this comes into is being aware of what it is that you really want. Like, what is it that's important to you? And like, we'll keep it a little bit high level, but for like guys, a lot of times it's respect,
Right.
And if you look at a lot of things that are happening, like, with parenting and the dating market and all this other kind of crap, where a lot of those problems happen, it's because guys aren't getting the respect that they think they deserve. And that, first of all, okay, that's fair. They're not. But then if you want to get into the minimum movement, maximum impact thing and how this segues into it, it's like, okay, if respect is something that's really important to you, you don't walk up to someone and go, you need to respect me, you bastard. Like, that's not gonna work. I can kind of promise you that. There's very few things I know for sure, but that is one of them. And what I've found is, if you want to have respect, you need to be able to respect yourself first, right? And in order to respect yourself, and here we get into the minimum movement, maximum impact, you've got to do the things that will make you respectable, right? So it's like, if you're sitting on the couch in your underwear, eating a bunch of chips all day, not doing anything, not moving, not being a whatever, that's not exactly great, especially if you have these delusions of grandeur, right? When it's like, I'm going to be something. Someone's going to find me and discover me. I'm like, not if you're still wearing Thursday's underwear from last month, Chad. It's not going to happen. And so you have to, if you want to get into minimum movement, maximum impact, you have to figure out, okay, what are the things that I have to do, zygote level crap, that's going to be able to start propelling me forward? Now, same concept. So that's going to be like, get moving every day. Don't eat like a dipshit, and start looking at your business like it's a real thing. Okay.
Right.
Where minimum movement, maximum impact is not an excuse to be lazy. And it's not easy to get there. Like, this is sort of like where, if you look at, I refer to it like the Bruce Lee 1-inch punch. Have you seen that stuff where he's just sort of like, like flicks the dude with a finger or something like that, and the guy's rib cage collapses, rips a hole in the space-time continuum, and he gets sucked into a vortex? That's what I'm talking about. And then, you get some poor white belt who's like, and he can't do anything. Like, I was awful at karate. The guy would often come over and be like, something's wrong with you,
breaks his wrist, breaks his own wrist trying it out.
Exactly. Like, that's what's going to happen.
Right.
So minimum movement, maximum impact is very similar to that 1-inch punch, where it's like, you have to really practice this. And it does take a lot of all the things that I was talking about previously, where you have to take a moment, you have to pause. Because what happens a lot of times, and this isn't exactly not necessary, there's a lot of double negatives, but I think you'll figure it out. You don't want to always be chasing money. And this is something Robert Kiyosaki said that kind of stuck with me for a long time, is when you're looking at an opportunity, you have to think, is this my money or is this somebody else's money? And I'll give you an example from my wife's business, actually, because this was great. Because she was in corporate America for years and years and years. And I've told her, since the day I met her, I'm like, listen, if you applied like 5% of your capabilities and your hustle to being an entrepreneur, I'm like, you would never look back. Well, now she's done it. And she's like, well, I guess maybe you're right. Yeah, one thing. I get one thing, okay? But what happened was, shiny object syndrome, as we all are very familiar with this crap, that's a thing that especially plagues newbies and people who aren't well established in things like that, because they haven't really learned what is going to work for them. And so they're going to go do this and do that. And I've worked with people before, and they've said this. I think almost all of them have. Hey, I bought this course. Do you think I should do this thing while we're working on this other thing and trying to get it to work?
Oh, you see that all the time. Does that sound familiar, Caroline? All the time.
Totally.
Every day,
Totally.
all day.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so now,
crazy.
Do you have a formula for hypnotizing every single person that's on this call into no longer suffering from shiny object syndrome? Because if you can do that, we would all be healthy, happy, fit.
Oh, 100%. Here we go. Right. All right. So I want you all to look in the camera. Here we go. I'm going to take the AirPod case, and you're just going to look at this. You're going to look at this one right here. I want you to think about the thing that you want to buy, that thing that you know for a fact, because the sales page absolutely spoke to the creature inside of your soul. I want you to think about your hand twitching toward your wallet. I want you to see the credit card in your mind. Now I want you to take your other hand and fucking bitch slap yourself. No, you're not buying it. There you go. You're all hypnotized.
It's true. It's true.
That's what you're not going to do today. Yay,
what you're not going to do
days.
today.
Exactly.
It is literally as simple as that, right? Sometimes you have to have these conversations with yourself. A lot of times I'll say, Ty, what the hell are you doing? That is my number one go-to for myself. If I'm doubting myself, Ty, what the hell are you doing? You're acting like a little bitch right now. If I'm going to get off track, Ty, what the hell are you doing? If I don't go to work out one day, right, and I'm laying there, what the hell are you? You have to have these conversations with yourself sometimes and be honest. And I think that we've gotten so used to babying ourselves that we don't have the real conversations. Now, I went to go eat something yesterday. I literally, we're at a resort right now and an indoor water park. And I used to be this lover of cheesecake. And yesterday, oh no, it used to be. Yesterday, 11 o'clock last night, we're coming back to our room and I walked past, right, this eatery that they have here. And they had a cheesecake that had the most amazing thick graham cracker crust on the bottom and on the side. It had like the strawberries and raspberries. It had this drizzle on top of it. And I sat there and I looked at this damn thing. I kid you not, for 3 minutes. For 3 minutes, I sat there and I looked at it. And I looked around and I said, what the hell are you doing? This does not go along with who you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I just walked and as quickly as that, I no longer wanted it and walked away and felt satisfied. Didn't think about it again until just now, this moment. And
yeah, thanks. You ruined it for everybody. I'd like positivity everywhere. My God, people, we're all going to gain 30 pounds because of this guy. Look at him. No, I like that. See, that's what the way that I phrase that kind of stuff is like, I'll find, because I'm subject to burnout a lot of times because I'll be going, a million miles an hour for days, sometimes weeks at a time. And it's like, I find you kind of have to pause, be mindful. I always ask myself, okay, where am I in space and time? And I'll do that. My kids look at me they give me that like WTF dad side eye kind of thing, because I'll say that when I'm standing in the kitchen cooking dinner or something like that, because I'll forget what I'm doing between moving from slicing vegetables to walking over to get, I don't know what it was. What was I trying to get? Oh my God. Oh, okay. Where am I in space and time? What was I attempting to do? Let's look at the big picture and all that other sort of stuff. So here's a fun way that all of these things kind of play together with minimum movement, maximum impact, and with the mindfulness and all these other kinds of things. Whatever you're trying to do in your business, it usually comes down to just a couple of very key elements, right? I mean, everybody's got their flowery thing and they can talk about whatever ridiculousness for hours and hours and hours, right? But what it really comes down to is you have something to sell, right? You have people who want to buy it, hopefully. And then you, like all a business is, it's sort of like it's like a mechanized animal that you feed it people and it poops money, right? What are you doing every day to feed it people? So if you want to take all the moving parts and boil them down into just the thing, first, identify the market, identify the product, or whatever it is that connection is going to be. Maybe it's a service, whatever. Then you identify who it is that you're going to be selling it to. And you literally have to ask yourself, what am I doing every single day to push that peanut, that little peanut of food into the machine? Go get your traffic, do the thing. And especially with like stuff like AI,
That's incredible.
It gets so much easier to do this because what will block people technically from being able to even do this is what I call the blinking cursor of epic death. So as you kindle people know, if you go to try to write something, you can have all these lofty ideas while you're soaping up your armpits. But the minute you sit down at your computer to do the tiddly tip type, what happens? It's like you literally hear the universe flush the damn toilet and everything just flows right out of your ears. So this is where AI comes into play in a really nice way, is just execute through AI so that you can get that, like, just, it doesn't matter how badly it sucks. It's something. Start with that. Remember? So it's like the formula is stabilize, optimize, expand. In that order, stabilize, at all times.
Optimize, expand.
Stabilize, right. That's something like I worked with Frank Kern for a while, and that was something that he would like, talk about the universal bitch slap. He's like, damn it, boy, stabilize, optimize, expand. I'm like, oh yeah. By the way, you're like 6 times bigger than me. It's just, you really want to keep it like that, because most people want to live in the sexy of expand, because that's where it's like, oh my God, so many ideas. And, but without the stabilize and optimize, the expand is just going to like fall. It's like building your house upon the sand kind of thing.
Or it never shows up, right? You never expand.
Right.
Like you never get to a point where you start making these sales if you're just all over the place, right? So
well, that's the thing. It's like
that.
It feels like what it is. You're play acting at business through the dopamine release of the expansion world, where it's like, I'm doing so much stuff. Oh, there's a new thing. Boom. And what you're doing is you're telling yourself a story that you're actually doing something that's important because it feels good. You're bullshitting yourself.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Yeah. That's what's happening. And then that's why I think that back to your first examples about, that's why for some people, sometimes when you're desperate and broke, and actually when you're desperate and broke, but you've invested in a program, then you're less likely to go and move away and go into another program, because sometimes I never had shiny object syndrome, because I thought there's no damn way, if I've invested this money in this program, it's going to go wrong. Right. I'm going to stay here until it works. But back to the core things, something to sell, people to buy. If you know that you're in a business where there's plenty to sell and plenty of people to sell to, then it's going to be as good as the other business that looks even easier and shinier or cheaper to run or whatever. And I think people often forget that. They just think, oh, this is taking too long. I've spent everything I had. I'm just going to start something that looks easier.
It's like, let's just switch the record, because then that's now you're in this new expansion place. You get that dopamine hit and you're like, oh, this is totally going to work. I feel like the universe is talking to me. I'm like, no,
this resonates.
That's your own ass having a conversation with itself.
It is.
You know what I mean? It's like, that's fine, because we all do it, but you have to kind of, again, this kind of gets back to me just being like, I'm probably doing something stupid right now. I just, I can just, okay, cool. Like, what do I need to do instead? And I don't, and like, I don't beat myself up for these things anymore. That's a big part of it, is like not getting all over yourself and chewing on your own soul, going, that's a foolish thing to do. It's like, it probably was, but
we do, don't we? When we fail, and we fail and we fail, like we've all done, and then we've thought, I shouldn't have done it that way, or I could have done it quicker if I'd have done this way. And we're constantly beating ourselves up, and then we are just shooting ourselves in the foot. So it's
practiced.
It's practiced. It is. It's programmed and practiced. So
we programmed ourselves because of all of this like unaddressed shame-based, essentially guilt. And, probably it's something from when we were a kid or something like that. We programmed ourselves to become self-defeating. And because we do it so much, we're like, oh, that's just my personality. It's like, well, because you've practiced it for decades at this point. Like, I'm not looking at any young people. Sorry, y'all, but I love you, but no. We've all been doing all the crap for quite a few minutes at this point, right? And so what you have to do is, this is where the mindfulness comes in, the gestalt, where you realize you're doing that and you're like, oh, I'm doing this. Maybe write it down or something ridiculous. Like, oh my God, write something. And that can really, really, really make a difference. Another thing, and this is something that I learned early on. So I was like a professional musician for 21 years. It was crazy. And a thing that I learned, and this was for artists like painters and writers and things like that. But there's a book out there called The Artist's Way. You don't need to go buy it. I'll just tell you the thing.
Yeah.
I actually didn't read past, I don't think it was chapter 6, because I'm like, nope, that's all I want. I just want this one thing. But they call them the artist pages. And every morning you get up, and you probably heard this described in multiple different ways, but it's like you would then unfiltered, you would just journal for like 10 minutes or something like that, first thing in the morning. And it's, again, this is another habit. This is another habit that you would develop and build. And something crazy happens with this is like, let's say you're locked up, you're not inspired, you're not feeling the thing, blah, 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 all that different kind of stuff. You actually have to just start doing it. You can't wait for the inspiration. which is one of those desperately unfortunate realities, is you have to actually do the thing to get the result. You can't wait for the result and then do the thing, because waiting for the result before you start doing the thing is right. It's absolutely like apex predator mating with the concept of I'm too fat to go to the gym. Okay. I'm sure
It's that concept, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I am too fat
Yes.
to go to the gym, you know? And it's like, no, you're not. You need to go to the gym and start moving. And then things start happening. And you're like, oh, I feel better. Wait a minute. I'm not so depressed anymore. Maybe cheesecake isn't the thing that I should be shoving into my face every 27 minutes because I feel bad about myself. And then you start to think about, well, hold on a second. Why is it that I feel bad about myself? Do I even think that? It's like, listen to this thought about me. And then you kind of like write that down and be like, oh, okay, cool. I would suggest starting to journal those things and find out, okay, maybe you don't know what to say instead. But again, that's why Jesus invented ChatGPT, is because it can tell you, hey, instead of this, maybe you should think this. And maybe that's not the thing that you could think, but guess what? Now you have an idea and there's no blinking cursor of epic death. You see, like one thing does the other, does the other. And if you can't do it, hire the robot to do it first.
Yeah.
And then you just
it's
do
the
that.
movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It's the movement. It's the getting started, right? And then you look, you have the confidence, you feel better, right? You know what to do, you know what not to do, but it's the movement. It's getting started there. Hey, Jonny, this has been incredible, man. I can't believe an hour has passed by already. We're at the top of the hour right here. I want to ask you a question.
I eat time. That's what I do. Thank you.
No, this is a beautiful thing right here. We're going to definitely get you back for part 2. Guys, do you want to have Jonny back? Put a 2 in the chat.
They're already saying part 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. And I've got, that's amazing. And I've got to run off time. I've got to run off now, but I was hoping you'd ask Jonny to come back, and we'll save the quote for next week, because this is far more fun.
And I was actually looking at the time for you, Caroline, so I know you had to go. So we'll see you next week.
Jonny, great to meet you. I'll connect with you.
Good to meet you. Have a good one.
Take care.
Absolutely. We're gonna organize something to get you back, Jonny, because we definitely have to talk about everything else. Tiger King. We've got to talk about your wife's business. We've got to talk about you being in a band, because that's one of the things that I used to look at and I'm like, oh my God, this guy's killing it in the band, just having fun. Because one of my goals is to learn how to play bass guitar. What instrument did you play?
Funny you should mention, 21 years bass guitar, formerly trained by the former principal bassist of the Utah Symphony.
Yep, you look at that. You see that? So I want to ask you a question. If you could leave this audience with one thing that has helped you the most in business, it could be a philosophy, you know, a way of life, something that you actually do in business. What's that one thing that has helped you the most and that you will continue to do for the rest of your life while you're in business?
If you're confused, I mean, there's so many random, stupid, small things that are just epically wonderful. But it really kind of gets down to looking at your business. So if your goal is to be like, okay, I need more money, I need to do this, I need to do whatever, think MVP, minimum viable product. Like, what is this? What is like the zygote level thing that needs to happen in order for just all of this to function? Like amoeba of the thing. You don't need to get too highfalutin and crazy. Just boil it all down. And like I said, it's like, here are the people buying stuff. Here's the stuff they're buying. Feed it traffic until it poops money. Just start with that, you know. And then if you're confused or if you're running into a wall, you know, ask the robot for help. Because it's fairly helpful as sort of like a Kickstarter for idea generation. You know, don't let because that used to be the thing. It's like, there's no excuse not to know because we have Google and YouTube. True. But now we also there's no excuse not to have an execution plan because we've got the robot. All hail the robot, because they will be our overlords.
And it levels the playing field right now, right? You could go in, you could be, 19 or you could be 90, and we all have access to this thing, right? We all have access to AI. I think the important part is learning how to ask it the right questions or tell it what to do in the right way. So prompting, learning how to prompt. If anything, go in and study prompt engineering, and then that'll put you on top of a wall there, guys.
I trained my whole team how to use it.
Yep. Super. This has been fantastic, man. I'm going to reach out to you. Let's do part 2. Let's talk about the Tiger King. All right, your involvement in that. Let's talk about your wife's business and your involvement in that. and let's just have some fun again. All right. So I appreciate you, brother. I'll reach out to you in a few minutes after this. All right. All right. The one and only Jonny Andrews. What do you guys think of having Jonny on? All right. Johnny's definitely high energy, great person, knows his stuff, as you can tell, right? Look, ChatGPT, AI, this is the future. You guys are intimidated by it. Don't be. Go over to ChatGPT, set up a free account. We're going to be talking about this at KCF Live. If you guys are joining us for KCF Live, you can go in and get your ticket. We actually start next Friday, so just over a week from now. So KCF Live will have an entire day's worth of ChatGPT and AI sessions where we talk about using AI for creativity, coming up with content, covers, descriptions, titles, marketing pieces, you name it. All right, so there we go. Let us know what your favorite part of today's interview with Jonny has been. Go into your Facebook group, post your biggest takeaway, tag myself, tag Caroline, tag Jonny. I'm actually going to add him to the group if he's not already in there. So Jonny, if you're still listening, I'm going to add you to our Kindle Castro Mastermind Facebook group so that everyone can go in and they can tag you. And then I should have asked him this while he was here, but when we bring him back, I'm going to ask Jonny, how can people, Jonny, are you available? Are you still there? Let's see. I want to ask you, how can people get in contact with you?
Well, damn it. I got to put my pants back on. Hang on a second. This is awkward. All right. Well, a lot of people have asked that before, and I'll tell you what I've told them. So on the second blood moon of the third solstice, I want you to light your favorite cat on fire outside next to the burger tree. No, I have a little thing called Scale Your Hustle. I have done very little with it, but this is one of those fun things where I'm going to be actually playing with AI more. I've done, it's funny, I've done an entire multiple coloring book series. I think I've published like 20, 30 of them at this point because I got bored one Sunday. I'm like, I wonder if I could do this. But scaleyourhustle.com. You can probably contact me through that thing. We're playing around with like various kinds of AI generated video. So I'll be pooping that stuff into the various ecosystems like TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, the good people at Facebook. So you can kind of watch that happen in real time. The vast majority of articles on the page are all human written because AI wasn't the thing until, that's it right there. Scale Your Hustle.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, awesome. Scale Your Hustle. All right, guys, go in, check Jonny out. Jonny, thanks again. I'll reach out to you. We'll get you back for part 2 and then probably part 3. I can see it in the future. All right, thanks, man. All right, guys, go in, post your biggest takeaway in the Facebook group, and then go in and register for KCF Live at kcflive.com. I'll see you on Monday, and then Wednesday after that, and then next Friday we go live at 11 a.m. Eastern time with KCF Live.